Call the CUB Board of Directors meeting to order. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. On to item 4. I'll turn it over to Mr. General Manager.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We have with us tonight Dan Pratt, who is the Senior Vice President of Regional Relations and someone that I count as a friend, someone that in TVA that I trust. Robbie, who you all know and who you know how much I care about him and how fortunate we are to have a caliber of people in what I think is in the public service of the Valley and doing a great job. And we appreciate you coming here. And I wouldn't say that, but it says certificate of appreciation on the agenda, so I'm thinking that's for a good thing. So with that, Dan, if you want to take to the podium, that would be great. We love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Greg, and board chair and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to come and address you. And yes, there's already the spoiler. Provide a certificate of appreciation for the great work of Clinton Utility Board. So if it's okay with you, I'll take just a couple minutes to talk about public power, partnership, and in progress. One of the things that TVA back in 1933 was founded on was improving the quality of life in an impoverished region, right, through navigation, through economic development, environmental stewardship, utilizing and harnessing the power from our dams and since generation sources to be able to improve the quality of life. And we do that in partnership. And so when we talk about the Valley Public Power Model, that's not TVA. That's TVA with 153 local power company partners. It's with their governing bodies, it's with their elected officials, and it's with the community at large. And I think TVA is in a great place, and in a great place with our relationship with local power companies to even do more in our community partnership. And so we had the opportunity to give away a STEM check to Clinton High School today. Those are the kind of things we want to be more active in, but we always want to be doing it locally. That's another tenet of public power, is local control. So respecting the great work of Greg and his team locally, how do we partner to make each, what both of our missions are, progress? So with partnership, I do want to spend a few minutes here because over time, TVA's contract with the local power companies has changed. It's evolved over time. It's actually been 20 years at times. It's been shorter. In fact, back in the 90s, we altered the construct a bit because of uncertainty and risk and deregulation, which played out in California, New York, and other places. And I think we should be thankful and proud that we have stuck to the Valley Public Power model, and I think we are now increasingly so the envy of the rest of the United States, frankly, as far as the actual model. But back in the late 90s, 2000s, we were on a 5-year contract with Clinton and the majority of other local power companies. And there were also a set of issues with our local power companies. There was actually TVA's debt was getting extremely high, even near the debt ceiling of $30 billion. And so our customers brought forth solutions or proposed solutions, and no one was more prominent in that discussion than Greg. And in fact, I spent most of my career building nuclear plants, and so I joined TVA to run the construction of a nuclear plant, but in 2010, I had the opportunity to move over and work for our then Executive Vice President, Van Wardlaw, who we were working together with our CEO on an initiative called Distributor-Owned Generation. And it was the opportunity, again, to leverage a partnership. TVA had debt constraints, and the actual motivation behind distributors owning generation was the protection of the model. How do we make ourselves even more together? I mean, something you can't separate that allows us to serve this mission of not for profit, not to return something to a shareholder, but to return the value to our stakeholders. And Greg was instrumental in Seven States Power, which came together. It was the first thing I worked on in this kind of strategic partnership with customers, and we actually were successful in procuring the South Haven combined cycle plant as a joint ownership. But that was end of 2010. And for years and years and years, we worked on what we called strategic alignment. What are these areas of opportunity or areas of conflict at times? And Greg was always the voice trying to bring people together. How do we solve the problem together? And so we actually made it from a set of issues down to around 4 or so what we ultimately called the key customer issues in about the 17, 18, 19 time frame. And those had to do with rate certainty, predictability of TVA. It had to be the opportunity for local power companies to own generation to be able to meet the needs of their customers, like solar energy. What we didn't want is someone to come to Greg and say, our industry has sustainability goals. I need you to provide me this renewable option or something. And Greg says, well, I can't, TVA won't let me. That wasn't acceptable for either party, right? So we had these set of issues. When our actually before our current CEO, Jeff Lyash, came in, we had the opportunity to put about 14 local power companies in front of TVA's board, each and every one talking about how we could resolve this set of issues in a true collaboration and partnership. Greg, in particular, with A.D. Frazier and some of our other board members, really made a commitment. Let's solve this together. We recognize TVA is constrained by planning 20, 40, 60, 80-year assets and investments on a 5-year contract. So if we can balance this alignment of long-term interests, it's got to be mutually beneficial. You know, we're in this together. Can we go from dating to marriage? We're planning for the long term. So ultimately, our new CEO came in. Greg and I were at the Grove Park Inn, happened to be when he got his Distinguished Service Award from his peers. Even at that time, as my great friend, he was always saying, Dan, we've been talking about this for a long time. And at that point, I was relatively certain we're going to get this into the end zone. And that was in May of 19. In August of 19, our board approved it, and Greg was at the board meeting that day to be one of the first signers of the long-term partnership agreement. Right now, today, 146 of our 153 local power companies have signed, and the other 7 we're working with. They're doing their due diligence, or they just enjoy their 5-year contract, which is also fine.
I've got an opinion on that, but I won't voice it.
And Greg helps us on those other 7 as well. But no, the one, when we had an initial kickoff meeting, a quote from one of Greg's peers was, "It feels like the fog has lifted." When we're worrying about kind of working against each other, not necessarily against each other, but trying to solve this alignment of long-term interests, once it was solved, now we could both face outward and put our full attention on the benefit of serving. And so the long-term partnership, I think, has fundamentally changed the opportunity, which leads us to progress. So now we can focus on the future. We have an initiative going on, Valley Vision 2035. How do we take where we are now and envision where we want to be in 2035? And Greg and others will be key contributors. I'm actually a resident of Chattanooga, Tennessee, one of the very sophisticated systems in TVA's service territory, but also matched by Clinton Utility Board's sophistication of IntelliRuptors and a smart grid system. And honestly, those are about the 2 most advanced systems on our entire, in the Valley. So Valley Vision 2035 is also acknowledging what's the role of local power companies in 10, 15 years, because generation ownership, the digitization, decarbonization, decentralization of assets are all going to drive a different utility model in the future. Y'all are well positioned for that already and well positioned to be an example for others that actually still have, physical meter readers and other things. So the advancement, utilization of technology for ultimately providing better service. And I'll say a couple more things on progress. One of the big E's, environmental stewardship, economic development, and energy is of course economic development. So no one, I think, has been more instrumental in working with my peer, our Senior Vice President of Economic Development, John Bradley, than Greg and his team on driving investment and jobs into your area and throughout the valley. So with all of that, I express my deepest gratitude to the personal relationship with Greg and the partnership with Clinton Utilities Board. And so we have a couple things to offer Greg here and the board, if I can get it out of here. But as I mentioned,
Check.
we gave those away earlier. So but Greg again was one of the initial signers of the long-term partnership agreement on the day of the meeting there. And then let me formally read the certificate of appreciation in recognition of your outstanding contributions to the Valley Public Power model and development of the long-term partnership agreement. Thank you for your service to Clinton Utilities Board, ratepayers, and Valley Public Power model.
Probably how new was that phone? Some grainy looking picture.
I'm sure it has a filter.
It's got all three lenses.
No comment. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
It's all right. I'm gonna walk.
Sure.
No.
But it didn't work, did it? So you want to know? Does it? Can you take one with my phone? Take one with your phone. All right. Trying to blame that on me, Robbie. Here, Dan. Please. There we go. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you so much, Fran. I'm gonna walk right to the door in case there's somebody want to pay a bill at home.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve Klein. Good to meet you. Yeah, give me a lunch sometime. Wouldn't like it. There's one for Robbie too. Thanks. Take care. We'll see you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Take care.
Thank you so much.
You see that?
I guess that's on top of what we got last week or last month.
Starting to see everything.
Y'all better cross something good.
Just bring him a certificate or anything, 'cause, you know.
Pictures and everything.
No pictures, no.
All right, congratulations. And we'll move on in the interest of time to item number 5, CUB pension plan update. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There, and I'm going to introduce Bob, who you know and we've known for years, and he's going to go over some of the things that are usual and customary in an update, that are requirements that we have to face. But I like 100% transparency, and I sent you an email, and then I sent you a text to make sure that you looked at the email, and I realized the timing on that. So we'll be glad to talk and answer any questions about that, but that's the only revision that I know that has any, substance to it, because it's not a standard thing, it's an adder kind of thing to that. So Bob, if you don't care to go through whatever you need to go through, and then if there's any questions, we'll be glad to talk about that.
Well, again, thank you, appreciate being here. I do want to introduce a couple of folks. Brendan Tronick works with me in the Knoxville office, and Austin Robinson, member of the Cherokee Country Club, or excuse me, Oak Ridge Country Club. Plays golf and good, all-around good guy. So I think the first item there is fiduciary review, so we would ask the board to approve that. But in a nutshell, just a couple of really, and this is all great news. It really is for the utility and the people that count on this for retirement income. First, in terms of rates of return, the rates of return performance exceeded benchmarks, and that's the measurement that we use, of course, to set the standard of what we're trying to achieve, both on a 1, 3, 5, and 10-year basis. So we did have outstanding performance in the retirement plan, met all the metrics, and exceeded those metrics. The other thing I would note is, from an actuarial perspective, in terms of funding, on a market value basis, the plan is 118% of accrued liability. The state of Tennessee just requires that you be 70% or better. If you're 100% as a private industry, that's rare. So we're very fortunate last year to have a great rates of return. Utilities always been very conservative when it comes to funding the plan. So when we look at 118% funding on an actuarial basis, that's an outstanding achievement. The other thing I would note, plan contributions actually dropped last year on an actuarial basis by about $100,000. Utility, wants to fund the plan, so they can contribute additional amounts over and above that if finances permit. So I guess the bottom line, when we look at the plan from an actuarial perspective and from an investment perspective, then it's just outstanding news. I don't know to what degree, Greg, you would like me to go through the report.
The pyramid, Bob, I like the pyramid, and I think you gave them the top of that, and if they want to drill down, they can do that, because this is the oversight review, and I think our chairman's pretty much familiar with how that goes in terms of funding and everything else. But if there are questions that are posed, I think it would be a great opportunity for them to ask. Or if you were sitting on this side of the table and you would say, well, I would like, this is an interesting fact or something like that I would like to know as a board member, we would like for you to share that.
Great lead in. So one of the things we did, as Greg knows, Dudley knows, and Todd knows, we had a meeting, several meetings over the last 18 months. So we've gradually changed the investment strategy, the focus of the retirement plan away from growth, and specifically large cap, mid cap, small cap U.S. funds, to more of a value orientation. So when we looked at price earnings ratios and other metrics, we determined, or believe that those metrics are far outside historic norms. And so we wanted to make sure that we preserved the gains we'd already had, and also then move to what we thought would be a better opportunity in terms of, again, price earnings ratios, more conservatively priced, more accurately priced, we felt, and that has certainly borne fruit. That gives us, we don't need to take undue risk. We have a well-funded plan. We have a very stable entity here, and so we can afford to move to a strategy which we more accurately reflects the markets going forward. The other thing on the fixed income side, we anticipated rising interest rates. We anticipated inflation many months ago. So far, that also is proven. So we moved into asset categories in anticipation of that, both on the fixed income side by shorter maturities and Another question might be Russia, exposure to Russia. We have roughly $19 million in the portfolio. It's less than $25,000, and that's very, very conservative. So the funds that are invested in Russia, some have written those down. Others are still holding those assets. The markets in Russia are open, but some of those securities cannot be traded at this point in time. So, but the exposure overall to Russia is extraordinarily minor in the portfolio. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Dudley, can you scroll down to our asset allocation? Like, there's usually a pie chart somewhere that shows us the breakdown to.
Got a great memory, yes.
Let's see.
Brenda would help you to give you a page number.
After tab 3 then.
Let's see. Right there.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, all right.
27.
Yep.
So help me out here as I'm reading this. I apologize. I went from one meeting to the next. What is our asset allocation here overall in terms of, you know, growth with income, balanced income with growth, or if you're familiar with those terms?
Yeah. So if we look down at the bottom at the blue, we can see large value is 11.46%. Large growth, 9.23. That was flipped, actually a little higher about a year ago. Intermediate core plus bond, it's 3.81. We dropped that, cut it in half. And you can see the others. So we have foreign large value, foreign small blend, foreign large blend again, and again, other types of instruments which we think are very, very conservative. But you can see a focus on growth, primarily in the portfolio, small value, mid value, and large value.
So what's our total fixed income position?
See, Austin, you know that off the top of your head.
I think it's 49%
So we're fairly balanced portfolio.
around there, 49% plus
On that-
alternative.
Yeah, but that includes alternatives, so it's not all just fixed income.
Okay.
So-
How much is our alternatives? And if you need to check, it's a.
Let's see, that is,
7-ish.
Okay.
That's, I can't, off the top of my head, I don't remember.
And
but
do you know
it's
what positions make up our alternative strategies?
yes, those funds, a couple of those. One is arbitrage takes into, that's the merger fund, yeah. So that particular fund, whenever a stock is, as you know, companies to be purchased.
I got it. I know
Okay,
what that.
yeah,
So
okay.
what other positions do we have in our alternative space?
real estate.
And what are we holding there? Like, what positions are making up our real estate holdings?
Global REITs, so Real Estate Investment Trust, and that's a global real estate fund. And what's good with these, new REITs is old-fashioned REITs was all residential mortgages, but nowadays REITs hold like storage units, wind farms, data centers. So this kind of REIT holds a lot more than what you would think of your normal real estate. So it's commercial real estate, it's not just houses, like residential houses.
How do we pick which funds we hold? Like, is there an investment committee? Is there a man behind the curtain? I mean, how do we arrive at these particular funds and say, I don't see a Vanguard represented? It doesn't mean that Vanguard's not in there somewhere, but how do we arrive at the funds that we choose?
So we have an investment analytic group, analysts, a lot of analysts in Connecticut. So they do all of our research. So we start with a list of all of the available funds, and then we have it's called a 5P process. It's proprietary to our organization. So we do various screens. Once we get through those screens, then we drill down into particular asset categories, and we look for funds which are meet a lot of criteria, but that would be, could be expense ratio, upside, downside capture, obviously expenses, consistency of performance, R square, alpha, et cetera, all the numeric components that you would want to look at for a particular fund. And then we analyze and deal with those funds on a quarterly basis.
So most of our equity positions are represented by funds? Is that correct? We're not holding singles positions?
No, we do not have individual securities.
And then are our funds ETFs, or are they mutual funds, or
They're
a blend of
mutual
both?
funds. Mutual funds.
Where's the 12B1s and the expense ratio, where does that go, to you guys, or?
Goes to our firm, but at the same time, we're paying trustees' fees.
Yeah,
out
we,
of that.
we worked on those 12B1s in order to accommodate a solution. And a lot of those 12B1s, although over time, they're not what they used to be, you know.
No, they're not.
They're, because the securities have reduced the impact that they have on the funds. But we, Dudley and I, we've tracked those funds, and Bob.
You do.
Bob helped us really to try to
We-
work an arrangement out to where a lot of that goes to the trustees and to offset the cost of that, of the trustee fund.
And we do not charge an investment advisory fee. So we do not have any USI funds, so we are independent.
When you talk about the 118% funded to liability, I'm more familiar with like a Monte Carlo, like an individual. I'm sitting in front of somebody and they say, I'm gonna retire, this is how much money I have. Do a Monte Carlo simulation and tell me if I get to be 90 years old and I'm spending this amount of money, will I have money when I'm 90, right? And they do all these
Right.
market analysis.
Right. Yep.
And so when you say we're funded liability, I'm not intimately familiar with that term. I'm assuming, it sounds like as a board member, that sounds great. But if everybody retired today and we had really bad markets going, when do we run out of money? Okay, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense, what I was asking?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great question.
Well, I know we're about to approve a fantastic performance of the 2021. I'm guessing, I haven't seen it, but we've probably off to a pretty rocky start first quarter. What do you guys, what are you seeing for 2022? What's your sort of market outlook? What's your economic outlook?
We'll mention a couple things in that regard, and we'll answer your question. So one of the things we do as actuaries for the plan is we use smoothing techniques. So on an actuarial basis, the plan is like 95% funded. So we don't take all of that gain at one time. The tendency would be if you get overly confident, if you will, you make bad decisions in a lot of those areas. So we bank part of the gain that we have, we amortize that gain, or we amortize losses on the investment side over a 5-year period of time. If there are actuarial gains or losses in other areas, so mortality, withdrawal, termination, disabilities, all those things, we also amortize those gains and losses over a period of time. So our goal is to provide stability in the retirement plan contributions for the utility. We don't want to see ups and downs, either from the result of asset gains or losses or liability gains or losses. So we manage that, I think, quite well. In terms of this year, I think we all expected it was going to be very challenging. We have international events. We have some uncertainty at home. We have inflationary concerns, all of us do. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but we've been saying for well over a year, 15 months, that inflation was going to be an issue, and we think we position a portfolio accordingly. But to answer your question, I think this is going to be a challenging year. Thank God I live in this country every day. I thank God. And we have a lot of jobs available. We have a lot of people, we have people potentially that can be looking for work, can find jobs if they want them. Wages are higher than they've been in a long time. Banks are in great, companies are in great shape financially. The consumer, by and large, is in great shape financially. So you look at the underlying information, you say, well, we're well positioned to withstand some challenges, but I think we will see some challenges this year. Yeah, so.
Now he's got me asking questions. So if we go back and look at, if we go back and look at a normalized EBITDA basis for the performance of the plan, right? When you talked about income smoothing, that kind of got my attention because different businesses, you know, I like to look at adjusted EBITDA. Then I like, you know, like a true
Sure.
normalized EBITDA.
Right.
how much do we have going, how much are we on an amortized basis right now in terms of, and I mean, ballpark, is it like 1%, is it like 10%? I mean, and did we see more move into that? You should have got me started. Did we see more move into that first quarter
Oh, this is,
now?
I'm an
Then you got me
actuary,
thinking.
this is kind of fun.
Sorry.
No. So,
And I mean, ballparks, I mean, I understand.
so on the, actuarial side, we have a gain of over $1 million, that we can utilize. And then.
That's being amortized, you said?
Yeah, they
Okay.
can be amortized,
Can be,
yes, and
okay.
that's amortized. And then, let's see. Make sure I give you an accurate figure here. On the investment side, we have an actual gain of about 2.2 million that we can amortize.
So
So
the cash is already here, it's just not
Yes.
been recognized
we don't
on
rec-
a
yes, sir,
P&L
correct,
basis.
absolutely correct, right, yep.
Okay.
And that's, of course, by design. Again, if you take that, next year you have an unfortunate set of circumstances, and that just compounds the issue that has occurred, so.
And we have, are we feeling, let's back to this question about 2022, are we seeing that we may end up having some, I mean, are we expecting a $3.2 million loss to kind of offset the, what we're amortizing or have available to amortize on the positive side?
I tell you, when I was 20 years old, I got asked by a client a question like that, and I answered it off the cuff. I was wrong. If a boss took my head off, I never forgot it.
I understand. Somewhat,
So,
we've all been there, by the way. My hair came out because of it.
Great actuary, but he's a lousy prophet.
Well, I'm just asking first quarter, I'm not even asking for the rest of the year.
so the valuation is done at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1, 2022, of course. So I think we had a drop in contributions. So I would suspect that we'll be closer to the original figure come July 1 of 2022. But I don't think there'll be anything out of the ordinary, given the way that we position a portfolio. It would take a dramatic downturn, yeah.
A question sort of following on that. It's good to hear that you all have looked ahead and positioned us with inflation in the economy today to weather that storm. But there are scenarios you could think about that the world economy, the U.S. economy could go into a significant recession, depending on what Russia does and some other things. Have you all thought ahead as to, are there things you would recommend doing or we should be doing if we head toward that?
So I would answer that in a couple of ways. One, this plan is 15, 20-year plan. So we always think long term. Try not to get emotional. We all do. We all do in the short term. But this is a long-term plan. So we have a long-term strategy, and that's why we have the amortization policies in place so that we can weather those storms by banking. And we've had a lot of gain in two different areas. We bank that to use that going forward. In terms of the overall economy, I think the U.S. is as well positioned as any country in the world. Our financial institutions are quite strong. Companies are strong. The individual consumer is strong. So I think when we look at all of that, I think we're as well positioned as we can be.
You don't think Europe could drag us down into a real issue if in fact they separate themselves from Russia totally on their energy?
I think that we'll find energy supplies from other sources. We're moving to alternative types of energy other than more electric, which is great for here. So that transition is taking place. So I think, not to say that it won't be rocky, anything can happen. I think we're well positioned. It's possible that there'll be, Russia, their economy, is the size of Italy. It's just staggering to me that I just think, again, thank God I live here. And
One of the things that they did, if you don't mind,
No,
they went to a value position. So basically what they've decided to do as a strategy against recession coming on and or inflation is move out of more growth into value, companies that pay dividends. So these smart guys in Connecticut got around and they did fundamental analysis on what companies they want to hold, and they looked under the hood, under the fundamentals that are out there and that are made available but to the public, to determine these are companies we want to hold represented by these funds. And so high dividend paying companies are flush with cash and are fundamentally strong. So even if we have rough economic seas, people still got to buy toilet paper and light bulbs. And so I feel pretty good that he's indicated that they've got a strategy. I mean, at some point, it's long-term, as he said, too. We're going to have negative returns this year at some point. It may not be at the end of the year, but the likelihood of events in Europe, we have predominantly domestic large cap companies, which, we have a tiny bit of our portfolio dedicated to international emerging markets. So I feel really comfortable with it. And I don't know, is that
Good, Mr. Chairman.
accurate?
Thank you for that.
This strategy is designed for a retirement program. We're investing retirement funds, and that is a different strategy than what we would do with our personal funds or corporate funds, on how we would look at the rate of return. So our protections are weighted towards the downturn. And that's where we really shine, is to minimize the downturns. The cost of that is we're not going to shoot up, 43%.
Correct.
So we weighted conservatively to protect us from these downturns, and the smoothing. The understanding behind that is tremendously solid. The foundation of why we're doing that. If we weren't doing it, if it was never been done before, we would invent it, because it's just the right thing to do, especially for what we're doing here. If Russia goes into Poland or Finland, other things will happen. If Venezuela, gets a nuclear weapon, something else will happen then too. But I'm not expecting you to predict that, Bob. But I don't care. When you come back next year, you better say it's been a great year.
Greg, and sometimes in life you got to stand up to a bully.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, I have one final question. What would it take to change our asset allocation to a more growth with income, increasing equity exposure or increasing fixed income exposure? Sort of walk me through the decision-making process, where that recommendation come from, whose decision it is.
Ultimately, that decision rests with my team, and I'm the lead on that team. So Austin is the second person, I guess, if you will. But we have 3 other people in the office that are investment advisory personnel. One of those individuals is a CFA and an attorney. The other all have degrees in finance and economics. So we're fortunate we also understand both the liability side and the asset side. So we're not just making recommendations on the asset side for investments without having an understanding of what that means on the liability side. So we're blessed as an organization to be able to do that. So in terms of the process, at this point in time, frankly, we would never make that recommendation. So a year from now, and I'm not sure even in the next 18, 24 months, given the markets, unless there's really a significant change, we would change our strategy. It may be that we tweak to go more into certain asset categories that would be a little more.
Like from growth to value, which you were talking about.
Yes, but generally those would be, we don't make bets. We might make strategic changes, but they would not be wholesale changes. Now, 3 to 4 years from now, things can happen. we believe and we hope that we can anticipate with a reasonable degree of certainty, I'll say, what changes are likely to occur, and we would make those recommendations at that time. We would never make a recommendation that we don't need to. The utilities financially, for us to make a recommendation that would entail undue risk would be irresponsible.
It wouldn't be received.
Exactly. It would not be, exactly.
Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have any other questions? Hearing none, do I hear an approval for our fiduciary oversight for July and December 2021?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. That motion is approved, and we move on to approval of amended and restated CUV pension plan document. Mr. General Manager, you want to turn the floor over?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You received this, has been part of your board packet. A lot of this is really in compliance. We're doing compliance editing on that, except for one area where we're amending the program to add a specific benefit, which you should have also received a notification on that. So Bob, if you just want to.
Just briefly, Greg's exactly right. This is required every 5 years. The IRS wants you to is what it is. Want you to restate the document. We take that opportunity to look over the document and see if there are other tweaks, I guess, that need to be made. A lot of that's just verbiage and nothing of substance. So that's the bottom line. There is one specific provision. The IRS does impose artificially limits to the benefit. So some of the individuals in the utility would be impacted as a result of that regulatory change. So if the plan is written this way, this formula, then these are the limits that come into play. So we can work around those limits by changing the plan formula, which is what we've done. So it's a benefit the individual would otherwise receive by reason of a long period of service with the utility, absent artificial limitations imposed by the IRS. So it just never ceases to amaze me. These are the restrictions. This is how you can modify. It's like, okay, so you got to pay people to do that. Well, but it's the way it is. So if you want to look at that section, we can do so, but I think it's very straightforward.
Unless there's a question on that, I think they've already had a review
Yeah.
on that.
I think anybody have any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the amended and restated pension plan document?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I hear a second? Second. A motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
I'm growing up in Morgan County and got to see David Crockett when I was 5 years old. As a result, we got electricity. I'm appreciative of
It's really good.
TVA.
You know, that's really good.
Bob, I appreciate you, just top notch, you and your team. One of the, I think for me, one of the most important things this board does is oversee this pension plan. This is a very important. Many companies, utilities, municipalities, they don't have pension plans. And those that do are unfunded and heading to the iceberg and down to the Atlantic, right? And so
Unbelievable.
I appreciate the work you guys do. I appreciate your patience with my questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Made my day. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda and Austin. You need to bring something with you next time. You know.
Brought your pension. I don't
No,
think you
we
should ask
like
more.
Brenda, we like Bob, and, you know, you gotta come up just a little bit.
You guys have a good evening.
Y'all take
Be
care.
safe. Thanks
Thank you.
again, Bob.
All right, on to item number 6, approval of vouchers. Do I hear a motion to approve the vouchers? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to approval of monthly reports, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We continue to exceed our forecast in electric by 77,000. The difference is to the positive, which helps us a little bit in our water, which although we're in tremendously great shape, this month we had a $16,000 deficit, and that put us to date $24,192 off. And Dudley, if you want to comment to that, feel free to say
The electric
whatever
department
you want.
had a net income of $412,000. Like Greg said, we're 77,000 ahead of the forecast. Our expenses are running less. Our purchase power margin is pretty good. So electric department's done great. The water department, the sales have hurt us a little bit in the water and sewer department. Industry's down, but overall both departments are in great shape. And I can drill deeper if you want, but that's all I've got.
Just a quick question. The revenue, obviously you had a 28-day month in February, which would account for part of it, but that's a pretty big swing for the month of February, just down,
Right.
usage was down?
Well, really, there was an adjustment. January was too high.
Gotcha.
January should have been lower. February should have been higher.
Now it looks obvious. I see it now. You're right. Okay, thank you.
You're good, buddy.
Well, I should have looked at January, my bad. December, excuse me.
There was an adjustment that floated between the 2 months that should have been
Okay.
corrected, so that's it. Kudos to you.
Do I hear a motion to approve the monthly reports? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Project status reports.
Thank you,
General
Mr. Chairman. We're tracking these two. We've already discussed both of these projects, and there is nothing new. They're still on schedule, and they should both be finished by the end of June. But I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have on those.
Is there any questions on the status reports? Hearing none, move on to other business. We don't have to approve that, do we?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving to other business.
Other business is I've given you a FLISR report. That was as of yesterday. I'm gonna try to always, because we make these reports up anyway. I like to give you copies of it. This one, TVA lost a circuit out of what essentially was an LCUB sub. It's a 169 line that comes down to us. Eagle Bend taps off of this, and they were in the dark. This would have put Turkey Creek in the dark. This would have put Lovell Road in the dark, Dutchtown Valley, all of that, thousands of folks in the dark. We were able to, because we lost our Claxton sub, we were able to re-energize that, had everybody back on in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Everybody else on the LCUB system had to wait until TVA got it back on. I know they isolated that, but that's a 56-minute outage that our people avoided, and that good folks in the mall apparently they didn't get the same level of service. So that's the FLISR report, and Dan already stole our thunder. Todd and I went to Clinton High School and STEM check for $5,000, and they're going to use that in a digital aspect of where they're competing on that. So we're very pleased with that. The kids were great, the school were great, the officials were great. So it was a very pleasant thing, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have the article that was in the Courier digitized so you could send it out?
No, but I'll make copies of that.
I tried to buy a paper the other day and they took my 75 cents. I wasn't gonna give the Courier another 75 cents.
Thank you for mentioning that, and I know you have been, really, Steve, have been a big proponent of that. I asked, because we got that press release, finally, remember they said they were gonna send it to us, well, they finally did. And historically, what we would do in the past is we would just send a press release down to the Courier, and of course, that never got it. So help me with that, Steve? Because you told me to be a little more aggressive to that. And I just called the editor, who's very nice. I mean, Ken Leinert. And I told him, we've got some great stuff, but to me, it would take an explanation if I were him. And if he had, sure, I'll come up and we had scheduled 40 minutes and he was here an hour and a half. I actually did a PowerPoint for him and I customized it for him, and then I gave him a hard copy of that. So I went through it so he would understand it, and then I gave him a hard copy so he could take it back, and that way if he had questions, and we took him up to the operations center, and I mean, he was just thrilled. He loved it all, and he was very complimentary, and he told me how sorry he wasn't on our system because of the problems he had on the system that he was on. So then he wrote, I thought, a lot of information, and it's on the top of the fold for the paper, and I was real pleased to get that.
I'd like to read it.
We'll digitize that and get that. It was really good.
Years ago, we were going home one night, and my wife stopped at the top of the driveway and got the courier out of the mailbox. By the time we got to the garage, she was folding it up. I said,
I know.
"What's wrong?" She said, "I'm finished.
Yeah.
I've read it all." We stopped taking the courier.
I had lunch every day with Horace Wells for a long time, and we'd go down to Hoskins, and he'd get a grilled cheese or a pimento cheese, some garbage, But what we did is we talked. Shattuck would come in every now and then, and he liked to talk, and I like to talk, because we're on different spectrums of politics too. So he always threw that stuff on me, and I would beat him down with it. It was a great paper then, and he was a great editor. And we had something that for our small town, others didn't have. And I'm telling you, if you're on, y'all need to do a better job with that paper.
Well, Clinton's not alone. We don't have a decent newspaper
No.
anywhere close to us.
Locally owned. That's because it's not locally owned.
Well, is there any other business to come before this board? Any state grounds?
Signed copies of that photograph. We'll get those digitized too.
All right. Having no other business come for this board, we will adjourn.